A few years ago, I was in Yokohama. I was following the steps of a scientific expedition that took place over 100 years ago. It involved 5 Mexican astronomers. I wrote a publication originally in Spanish, and for this occasion, I have translated a fragment of it. So let me read it for you. The publication is titled Sunlight minus a Firefly. Astronomer Francisco Díaz Covarrubias is one of the promoters of the construction of the observatory that in 1863 was located in the Chapultepec Castle in Mexico City. Although the wake of recognition following him is rather due to an event that took place in 1874, when along with 4 other Mexican scientists, he embarked in the Veracruz harbor bound for Japan. A photograph portraying the 5 members of the Mexican astronomical expedition has been preserved. It was taken a few days before the voyage. At the time, for most people, the Mayan civilization was a mere shadow buried within immense forests. Precisely 1,000 years prior, Mesoamerica had had epic observatories, astronomical treatises, and hundreds or thousands of experts who studied and computed the movements of the stars. All of this was unknown to the 5 men posing in that 1874 photo. And so, while the civilizations of Mesoamerica lived their own quote-unquote renaissance, Europe was plagued by ruthless religious intolerance. The so-called Old Continent had lost knowledge about Roman technologies such as how to make concrete for constructions. And its scholars were far behind their Asian neighbors as they didn't know even about the number 0. Europe was a place far away from the technological splendor of China, the country that had invented gunpowder, the compass, the printing press, yes, 600 years before Gutenberg, and the most advanced marine engineering. Europe was a place alien to the scientific innovations of the Arab world, promoted on the basis of the Greek classics that they had saved from the Christian bonfires, and the mathematics from India and Babylon, further improved by the Arab world. We are speaking about equations that would later enable 20th century humans to land on the moon. Surprisingly, by the 16th century, it was Europe, the land suddenly consolidating the largest cultural and scientific hub in the world. The dogmas of medieval Catholicism began cracking, while humanism and Protestantism burst in as a powerful ideological alternative. Likewise, the silver arriving from the Gori Potosí mines in Bolivia, which doubled the capital circulating among the European kingdoms, served to pay the bills for these renewed ambitions that included the creation of large engineering projects, new academic institutions, and patronage for scientific advancement. And by the 19th century, theology was a domain separated from science, in the same way that as liberals aspire, the church would be separated from the state. One of those convinced liberals is astronomer Díaz Covarrubias. For him, it is clear that there is a link between his scientific work and the social quote-unquote progress of his country. The expedition that he and his colleagues are about to undertake that autumn towards Japan is scientific, but for him it is also essential that it, quote, inspire modern ideas among my fellow countrymen, end of quote. The expedition departs by train from Mexico City to Veracruz, and from its harbor they are going to journey a complete orbit around the planet. Covarrubias is 41 years old. he retains a marked agility and a somewhat aristocratic manner. That morning, in the port, he is rather agitated. He approaches the captain of the ship to insist that he should not postpone the departure. He continually reviews his notes. At times, he talks with his colleagues, and at times, he even finds himself involved in conversations that really do not matter to him. Covarrubias carries with him a shipment of large wooden boxes containing the finest astronomical equipment that his country has. There is the unwanted possibility that the 5 scientists, along with their shipment, will not make it in time to the final destination. The route to Japan is long, and it is not possible to set sail from the Pacific coast of Mexico, since there are no reliable routes linking the Mexican capital to the west coast of the country. On those crippled routes, the observation devices would have been spoiled. From Veracruz on the Atlantic coast, the route continues to La Habana, New York, and then they cross the entire United States to San Francisco. Then they sail for weeks to anchor finally at the Yokohama harbor. Covarrubias fears that the execution of the itinerary could be delayed, and also that the precious equipment could arrive damaged or having lost their calibration. Consequently, he personally supervises the handling and placement of cargo at each station and port. Another member of the scientific expedition is a journalist and engineer, Francisco Bulnes. Both men are going to write separate books collecting the memories of this long journey. Bulnes will write memoirs with latent literary sensibility, which he calls 1,000 Leagues, while Diaz Covarrubias will remain on a more scientific and historical tone in his Journey of the Mexican Astronomical Mission to Japan. Both books are precious documents of the very first contacts between two universes separated by the vastness of the Pacific Ocean. Finally, at midnight on November 8, 1874, their ship reaches the Japanese coast. Covarrubias looks through the small window in his chamber and writes down about these first images. Quote, "The clouds had almost completely disappeared, and under the scarce clarity of the stars, I could only see the Asians in the boats as shadows. At a greater distance, and at a certain height above the sea, the black masses of the hills that surround Yokohama could be distinguished from the land. Limiting the horizon to the distant mountains loomed over by the dominant peak of Mount Fuji. The next day, the scientific team begins the preparations. In a month, this is December 9, a rare astronomical event will take place. Venus will perfectly align between Earth and the Sun. This is the mission of the Mexican Astronomical Expedition, to observe and measure the duration of this event, known as the transit of Venus. In modern history, this is the first international expedition led by Latin American scientists.